In tonight's Chicago PD episode, Detective Kevin Atwater went to a bar. He was supposed to meet up with his brother. They haven't talked lately. He wanted to reconnect. He didn't know that his brother would flake on him, but ended up not being a bad thing. He met someone at the bar. Her name was Valeria. She goes by Val. She got ditched as well. She agreed to meet someone for the first time, and her only request was that it be at this cop bar. She thought being surrounded by cops would keep her safe. Her date must not have liked that because he never showed. He ghosted Val. She met Atwater. They got to flirting, and it could have gone somewhere if Atwater hadn't left early. Atwater was calling himself all kinds of stupid for not getting her number before he left. Only he responded to a call. There was shot fired at a store, and he was the closest to the scene. The person that called 911 was still outside the store when Atwater showed up. He said he didn't see anyone leave since the shooting began. Atwater didn't know what he was facing. He still entered the building alone to see if he could preserve life. The detective found the remains of several people. He even found a survivor. The survivor was Diane. She was the manager at that store. She was in shock at first. Then it kinda hit her all at once, and she wanted to check on her people. The cops stopped her from re-entering the building. They said there was nothing she could do. She's the only one that survived that night. Everyone else had been killed. They'd been killed in a robbery. There appeared to be at least 3 offenders, and they stole about $5,000 that night. They must have caught one of the employees leaving from the back door, and they pushed their way in. What the cops couldn't figure out was why it became violent. The thieves got inside before the alarm could be raised. They got the money. The employees were complying, and so why were they killed? The thieves could have left without killing anyone. They chose to get violent. The cops couldn't ask Diane what happened because she was all over the place. She was so traumatized that she couldn't give details. She even second-guessed herself. She said it was 3 people, then it was 2 people, she wasn't sure. Diane said that they got $5,000, then she said it was $10,000. She thought she described what one of the men looked like, and instead she identified a patrol officer that was second to the scene. The only credible information she could give them was Ignacio Fuentes, the guy shoplifted from her store. They called the cops. He got arrested and was bailed out the same day. He went back to the store. He threatened them because they called the cops on him. And Diane couldn't even say what he looks like. The cops have the arrest record. Ignacio was over 300 pounds. Diane kept confusing him with someone that was skinny. Sergeant Voigt had to call in a forensic psychologist. This person ended up being Val. Val didn't say she was police affiliated when they met at the bar. Atwater brought that up, and she reminded him that things got cut off before it went anywhere. Val went on to speak to Diane. She determined that Diane was suffering from PTSD. Her memory was no longer hers to control because the mind was fighting to protect her. Atwater reminded both Val and Voigt that they helped others recover traumatized memories. He suggested they do so with Diane. Val was against it, but Voigt backed up his detective. They carefully helped Diane to remember. Diane remembered that one of the thieves was called Bird by one of his friends. The cops looked into anyone who goes by that nickname. They found Mike Ivington. He has a record for robbery. He's never gotten violent before, and so this time something must have happened. The police got the address to Livingston. He was leaving right as they came on his block. They chose to follow him, and he led them to his friends. Unfortunately, they saw the cops. They put on masks. It turned into a shootout in a very public place. There were several civilians that got shot. The cops also failed to arrest their shooters. Livingston got away. The face of one of his partners was also seen. The cops later showed the photo of the 2 men they knew about to Diane. Diane couldn't identify either of them. Val thought Diane should go home. The woman's been through a lot. She's been up for hours. She needs to go home. She needs to sleep. Atwater wanted to keep questioning her, and Val put her foot down. She sent Diane home. Atwater had to work the case some other way. He also had to deal with his landlord. Right after he freed himself for that, the cops identified the 3rd shooter. It turned out to be Diane's cousin Jackson. They don't have the same last name. Jackson was always crashing at Diane's house. She lets him sleep on the couch whenever he needs a place to stay. Jackson was still at her place when they sent Diane home. The police rushed to Diane's the second they knew she was in danger. They found her badly beaten up in her living room, and there was no sign of Jackson. But Diane was still alive. She said it wasn't Jackson that beat her up. It was his friend Zeke. Zeke was one of the killers they were looking for. Atwater, however, wasn't thinking about the perps. He was beating himself up for sending Diane home. He didn't want to do it. Vol forced his head, and so he shouted at Val that her wrong decision could have killed Diane. The cops then tried to track Jackson's car. It didn't lead anywhere. He and Zeke had their phones off. They were on the run, and the cops came to believe that Zeke would reach out to his old friends. Zeke was once connected to Neil Stanton. Stanton could give them what they needed to leave town. The cops tracked down Stanton, and they found Zeke. Zeke was arrested. Atwater personally got to arrest Jackson himself. Atwater later visited Val's home to apologize. He knew he shouldn't have yelled at her, or say she was responsible for Diane getting beaten up. He said he was sorry and she forgave him. She also warned him about getting burned out. His phone was always going off because someone always wanted something from him. He never turns his phone. He needed to rest, and so Val offered up her place.